Ryan sighed, glancing at the flashing lights reflected in his rearview mirror. A pointless traffic stop in the middle of the night. He eased the car to the shoulder, keeping both hands on the wheel. Years in the FBI had taught him one thing: any interaction with a corrupt cop could turn dangerous fast. And with someone like Tom Sanders, there was no telling what he might pull. The patrol car's door creaked open behind him. Tom stepped out, his boots hitting the pavement with an air of smugness. He strolled forward slowly, one hand resting casually on his gun belt, as if approaching a dangerous suspect. But Ryan knew better. This was just a power play. He could feel Tom's gaze, the same scrutinizing look he'd faced all his life. Tom had never met Ryan before, and in the dim light, all he saw was a black man driving alone on an empty road. And that was reason enough to start trouble. Tom tapped on the window with his flashlight. Ryan rolled it down, his face calm, unreadable. "Out late driving alone, huh?" Tom smirked, feigning friendliness, but his tone carried none of it. Ryan said nothing, just studied him in silence. Tom liked that. He took silence as fear. "License and registration." He held out his hand, his gaze sharp, acting as if he controlled everything in this moment. Ryan didn't move. Instead, he asked evenly, "What's the charge?" Tom shrugged, playing indifferent. "Routine check. Not a lot of folks driving around this late for no reason, right?" Ryan wasn't surprised. Same old tactic. Stop them, pressure them, abuse the badge. Tom squinted, studying Ryan closer. "You look familiar." Ryan knew this moment would come, the moment Tom realized he just pulled over the wrong man. But not yet. Tom didn't know, and Ryan had no intention of making it easier for him. He reached for his wallet, calmly pulling out his license and handing it over. Tom took it, eyes scanning the details. The silence stretched. Then Ryan spoke, his voice level. "Is there a problem, deputy?" Tom frowned. He didn't like the way this man spoke. No fear, no submission. Annoyance crept into his tone. "Pop the trunk. I need to take a look." Ryan sighed, glancing at the flashing lights reflected in his rearview mirror. A pointless traffic stop in the middle of the night. He eased the car to the shoulder, keeping both hands on the wheel. Years in the FBI had taught him one thing: any interaction with a corrupt cop could turn dangerous fast. And with someone like Tom Sanders, there was no telling what he might pull. The patrol car's door creaked open behind him. Tom stepped out, his boots hitting the pavement with an air of smugness. He strolled forward slowly, one hand resting casually on his gun belt, as if approaching a dangerous suspect. But Ryan knew better. This was just a power play. He could feel Tom's gaze, the same scrutinizing look he'd faced all his life. Tom had never met Ryan before, and in the dim light, all he saw was a black man driving alone on an empty road. And that was reason enough to start trouble. Tom tapped on the window with his flashlight. Ryan rolled it down, his face calm, unreadable. "Out late driving alone, huh?" Tom smirked, feigning friendliness, but his tone carried none of it. Ryan said nothing, just studied him in silence. Tom liked that. He took silence as fear. "License and registration." He held out his hand, his gaze sharp, acting as if he controlled everything in this moment. Ryan didn't move. Instead, he asked evenly, "What's the charge?" Tom shrugged, playing indifferent. "Routine check. Not a lot of folks driving around this late for no reason, right?" Ryan wasn't surprised. Same old tactic. Stop them, pressure them, abuse the badge. Tom squinted, studying Ryan closer. "You look familiar." Ryan knew this moment would come, the moment Tom realized he just pulled over the wrong man. But not yet. Tom didn't know, and Ryan had no intention of making it easier for him. He reached for his wallet, calmly pulling out his license and handing it over. Tom took it, eyes scanning the details. The silence stretched. Then Ryan spoke, his voice level. "Is there a problem, deputy?" Tom frowned. He didn't like the way this man spoke. No fear, no submission. Annoyance crept into his tone. "Pop the trunk. I need to take a look." Ryan kept his expression calm, but in his mind, he was calculating every possibility. Pop the trunk. Tom stood there, legs spread, hand resting on his gun belt, a classic power stance of men who thrived on intimidation. The fake friendliness was gone. His voice was lower now, carrying the weight of an order. Ryan arched an eyebrow, unmoving. "Any particular reason?" Tom smirked, crossing his arms. "Got a report about a suspicious vehicle in the area." Ryan nearly laughed. "A pathetic lie." He dealt with far more cunning men in the FB, real criminals, terrorists, cartel bosses with global networks. But here, on a quiet little road in Cedar Springs, he was facing the worst kind of power. Men with guns and badges who didn't care about the law. Tom wasn't looking for evidence. He was looking for a reason to humiliate him. Ryan took a slow breath, pushing down the frustration. Arguing would only escalate things. "That's so?" he shrugged, feigning indifference. "Go ahead, then." He opened the door and stepped out, moving deliberately. Tom watched every motion, searching for resistance. When he found none, his irritation deepened. Ryan walked around to the back and lifted the trunk. Inside, a suitcase, a small toolbox, a neatly folded jacket. Nothing suspicious. But that didn't matter. Tom wasn't searching for anything. He just wanted to prove he could. He stepped closer, deliberately invading Ryan's space, pressing his presence. "You live around here?" Ryan met his gaze head-on, voice steady. "I'm the new sheriff of Cedar Springs." In that instant, everything changed. Tom froze. Tom leaned down, his smug expression unwavering, until his eyes locked onto the large manila envelope lying neatly among the other items. The bold, printed words on the front practically screamed at him. "Termination notice, Tom Sanders." His entire world came to a screeching halt. Tom lunged forward, yanking the envelope from the trunk, nearly tearing it open as he ripped out the document inside. His eyes darted across the lines, but the only thing he truly saw, Ryan Mitchell's signature, right there, clear, undeniable. Ryan crossed his arms, watching calmly. "I signed it this morning," he said, voice low and firm. "You're no longer an officer in Cedar Springs." Tom's face drained of color. He gripped the paper tight, his throat tightening with fury. He couldn't believe it. He, the man who had controlled this town for years, was being stripped of his power right here, in the middle of a traffic stop he thought he was running. Tom let out a dry chuckle, but there was no arrogance left in it, only bitter resentment. "You think a damn piece of paper can get rid of me?" Ryan took a step closer, his gaze ice cold. "It's not just a piece of paper." He nodded toward the envelope still clenched in Tom's hands. "Copies went to the city council, HR, and the sheriff's department. You have no power here anymore." Tom's jaw tensed, his fists clenching so hard his knuckles turned white. But he wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat easily. Not now. Not ever. He glared at Ryan, venom in his eyes, then slowly stepped back. "This isn't over." His voice was low, dangerous. "You're going to regret coming here, Mitchell." The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken threats. Ryan didn't blink, didn't flinch. "I'm not going anywhere, Sanders." A cold night wind howled through the empty street, rattling the police radio on Tom's belt. One last echo of his authority before it was gone forever. Tom gritted his teeth, his grip tightening around the termination notice, but he forced his voice to stay steady. "You can't do this," he snarled, his bloodshot eyes burning with fury. "I've served this town my whole damn life." Ryan raised an eyebrow, arms crossed over his chest. "Served?" he echoed, his tone dripping with mockery. "Are you sure about that?" The air between them grew thick. Ryan stepped closer, the glow of the street lamp casting his shadow over Tom, making him feel smaller than ever. "Let me remind you." His voice was slow, deliberate, each word a dagger aimed straight at Tom's chest. "You beat an 18-year-old kid in the middle of town just because he wore a hoodie and looked at you the wrong way. You took bribes from the Iron Fangs and let their smuggling operations run unchecked. 2021, you were the last officer seen with a missing girl, and to this day, that case is still buried." Each sentence landed like a punch. Tom swallowed hard but forced himself to fight back. "You don't have proof," Ryan smirked, slipping a phone from his jacket. "Don't I?" Beep. A recording played. Tom's own voice filled the silence, negotiating a deal with a local drug trafficker. Tom's face drained of color. He blinked rapidly, his gaze darting around as if searching for an escape. He tried to keep his composure, but Ryan saw the panic flicker in his eyes. "You've lost, Sanders," Ryan said, his voice low but absolute. Tom clenched his fists, hatred blazing in his stare, but he couldn't do a damn thing. He stood there, alone in the dark, as the power he once wielded crumbled into dust. Tom took a shaky breath, trying to keep his composure, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. He wasn't ready to give up. "Mitchell?" His voice dropped, almost pleading, but there was still a trace of scheming in it. Listen to me. You don't understand the full picture. Ryan folded his arms, his gaze cold as ice. Then enlighten me. Tom swallowed hard, his eyes darting around. I know who really runs this town. People even the FBI wouldn't dare touch. If you help me, I'll tell you everything. Ryan studied him. A lie? Desperation? Or was it a real warning? Either way, he'd heard enough. Ryan slowly pulled out his phone and dialed. Wait, hold on. Tom panicked. Beep! Beep! This is Ryan Mitchell, he said, his voice firm and steady, confirming Tom Sanders is officially terminated, effective immediately. Silence on the other end. Tom held his breath. Then a voice crackled through the radio. Copy that, Chief. Tom let out a slow exhale, not in relief, but because he knew it was over. Ryan lowered his phone and locked eyes with him. You're just a regular guy now, he said calmly. No badge, no power. Tom clenched his fists, his eyes burning with hatred. He had lost everything, and nothing hurt more than that. The air between them was heavy as lead. Tom's eyes burned red, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Rage, humiliation, fear. He stepped forward, his voice dripping with venom. You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me? Ryan didn't answer. He simply stood there, unshaken, unmoved. Tom's breathing was ragged, his chest rising and falling as if he were fighting something deep inside. He looked around, the town he once controlled, but now he was standing at the edge of losing it all. Ryan held his gaze, his voice calm yet sharp as a blade. You're standing at a cliff, Tom. Step back or throw yourself off. The wind howled through the empty street. Tom trembled, but he couldn't deny the truth. He had lost. His teeth clenched, his eyes filled with seething hatred. But he also knew one thing. Ryan Mitchell was not a man who could be threatened. The moment stretched, endless and suffocating. And then, Tom took a deep breath and stepped back. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his heavy footsteps fading into the darkness. Ryan stood still, watching him disappear. Cedar Springs would never be the same again. The rain began to fall, heavy droplets slamming against the ground, carrying the damp chill of the Texas night. Tom stood frozen, his fists clenched tight at his sides. He glared at Ryan, his eyes filled with both rage and uncertainty. His entire life had been built on unchecked power, on a system where no one had ever dared to stand against him. Until now. His jaw tightened, his voice raw with barely restrained fury. You really think you can change everything? Cedar Springs isn't as simple as you think. Ryan said nothing. His gaze remained steady, unwavering, as if he could see straight through to the fear gnawing at Tom from within. Unable to take it any longer, Tom let out a frustrated growl and slammed his fist into the side of his cruiser. The rage inside him erupted like thunder in the storm, but deep down he knew he had lost. Taking a slow, shaky breath, he stepped back. There was nothing left to do but accept the truth. Ryan didn't say another word. He simply turned, walked to his car, and shut the door behind him. The sound echoed through the empty street, sealing the divide between them. One man who had ruled with fear, and another who had just rewritten the rules. In the rearview mirror, Ryan saw Tom still standing in the rain, his shoulders heavy with the weight of everything he had just lost. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Ryan drove slowly through the empty streets, the very streets he had sworn to protect. As he pulled up in front of the police station, he let his gaze linger on the old building, worn but significant. Inside those walls, resistance still remained. Officers loyal to Tom, men who had spent years bending the law for their own gain, were still there, watching, waiting. Stepping through the doors, Ryan could feel their eyes on him, furtive glances, silent tension thick in the air. No one spoke, but he didn't need them to. The message had already spread. Cedar Springs no longer belonged to the corrupt. Justice was taking back its place. But Ryan knew this fight wasn't over. Tom Sanders was only the surface of something deeper, something rotting beneath the foundation of this town. The ones who had propped him up, the real power hiding in the shadows, they were still out there, waiting for their moment. Ryan wasn't afraid. He had faced worse. A small smirk crossed his lips as he clenched his fist. The real battle was just beginning.